Good evening. Welcome to Bronco and V. I don't really have a show name. We do a lot of different things on here, but I do a lot of Arsenal stuff. I do a lot of video game streaming, and I talk college football in the NFL. And I'm welcomed by Houston Burnett. Are you still writing articles for Rubbing the Rock? Or
I'm taking a little bit of sabbatical from writing and doing the Morgan Thomas show. I nothing but respect for Rubbing the Rock. I'm probably going to go back to writing for them or some other places too, TBD in the fall. But I was just going to take a couple months because you can hear the kid in the background. A lot going on, so I'm just taking a break. But I was with Rubbing the Rock and the Morgan Thomas show.
Gotcha. And so you are a lifelong Clemson fan, and did you want to go into a little bit of your Clemson journey and just share that for people that may not know?
Yeah, man. So I am a little bit different as far as it goes for a Clemson legacy. Most of the time you hear Clemson legacy and it's great-grandfather, grandfather, father, son. With me, I had 3 older brothers go to Clemson. I'm the youngest of 4 boys. I'm from the sticks of Spartanburg County, in a little area called New Prospect in Campobello. Went to Chapman High School, graduated in 2009, and went to Tri-County for 1 year before I transferred into Clemson. And when I got there, I got to see the foundation being built for a lot of what we see today in football. Dabo had just been hired a year, the fall before I got there. So my first fall officially in Clemson, even though I wasn't a student, was 2009. And then my first as a student was 2010, even though that year kind of stunk. But then I got to see 11 and 12. And then graduated, looked around a little bit, bounced around to some different jobs and eventually found a job in Greenville, got married, moved out here. I still live out here and started doing some writing and podcasting stuff a few years ago during COVID, just to keep myself sharp with everything. And that's where I'm at today, man. Gigantic Clemson sports fan, huge college football fan, and local upstate SC native.
So to pivot to that, and that's, I think, where I found you and Morgan was during COVID. I think maybe a little bit before that, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that's when I was embracing a little bit more of listening to the podcast more. But I think it's been about 5 or 6 years since I found you guys. But I do remember it around that time frame. So I started really following Clemson football, I think, around 2006. We had a youth pastor. Like I said, I'm from South Carolina originally, but my dad's an Alabama fan, Alabama family. So it's really I had to really everything that I like, I had to push myself towards that. There wasn't any, hey son, you like the Braves, or hey son, you like this. So I was always a contrarian to my father, but we had a music minister and his son, and they were Clemson fans, and it really was kind of like we became good friends, and I got more back into it. Charlie Whitehurst, Tommy Bowden. So that's where my affinity for Clemson came into it. But yeah, it's been a fun ride with Dabo. So I guess that's where I'm pivoting is what's the temperature down there now, given, I guess, I don't want to say, because I mean, the expectations obviously raised through the years. And you probably come from a ilk where 8-4 wasn't a horrible year, right? And 7-5, beat Florida State, beat South Carolina. You felt okay with it. You knew where you were at that time.
Yeah, I mean, as far as taking temperature goes, I'm a little bit more level-headed when it comes to that than a lot of other people. I'd love to win the national championship every year. I'd love to hit 11 wins every year. I'd love to win the ACC every single year, and so on and so forth. But the fact that we as in Clemson fans, have witnessed 2 down years with a fairly lackluster offense, and we've seen that team go 10-3 and 11-3 with a BCS berth or I guess New Year's Six berth in between. So you're essentially 21-6 with virtually no offense, and wins over your rivals. You've beaten Florida State twice. You were 1 botched special teams play away from being South Carolina twice. You got a conference championship game and a berth in the Orange Bowl. So if that's a down year, what's it look like when we're good? And that's the point that I want to drive across to people is this is a lot more talented roster than people seem to want to give it credit for. So if it does start humming, it's going to get going really fast.
I agree with that. And it's funny because I did a video about a week ago I went over the Phil Steele magazine and looked over it and gave, well, not my predictions, but my thoughts on what the roster looked like and my concerns going forward. I think you and I talked offline last year. I was really more concerned about, and I saw it with the Denver Broncos last year. It drove me nuts, getting under center and creating that diversion and the I want to say the guys you get the secondary, you confuse the defense a little bit more. And I think Clemson was too much out of shotgun, in my opinion. But obviously things are changing from the old offensive coordinator to now to Garrett Riley. What do you expect to see with him?
Well, you're going to see out of shotgun a lot in this. I think that's the way that you're going to see most up-tempo offense go.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people will confuse this as it's just going to be an automatic air raid. Garrett Riley is different than Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley wants to throw the ball, a million plus touchdowns through the air, whatever. Caleb Williams, however you want to slice it. Garrett Riley is a lot more balanced, and you see that people want to talk about how TCU was an air raid team, but Max Duggan got to the Heisman Trophy presentation last year off of the touchdowns he scored with his legs. They utilized the run with a quarterback. They had two significant running backs that they utilized. A lot of jet motion, a lot of screens that they do, but it's also based on their tempo and how fast they want to go. They can go super fast. They can go, kind of dictate that. Essentially what Garrett Riley wants to do is he wants to dictate the pace of the game, and he wants everybody to know what they're going to run. You just know you're not going to be able to stop it. And so, I think if there's something that can scheme your playmakers open, which I trust Garrett Riley to be able to do that, and then be able to have an effective run game in and game out, you definitely could see a vast improvement, especially from start to season to the end of season with this offense.
Yeah, I was trying to pull the digital magazine. I bought the physical and the digital for the Phil Steele. And that was the big takeaway is the wide receiver room. Let's pivot back to quarterback. Because I'm having a hard time remembering the old OC's name from last year. That quarterback's coach. He got
Brandon Streeter.
There we go, Brandon Streeter. I'm bad with names. I remember faces and everything. But so I think the DJ story is the one I think that has got people a little bit, obviously it's very tribal with how you feel about DJ. Either you like him or you don't. And I personally believe he was the wrong quarterback for the system. Because when he how do you feel about that?
There's a lot of different things to unpack about that. Is one, we saw a good DJ. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen him ever perform well. Look at 2020. He went into Notre Dame and lit that place on fire. He played loose. He played on point. He was relaxed. And something or another, I don't know. I know that there's speculation about stuff that happened with family life and everything in the offseason between 2020 and 2021 that definitely could have affected that. But to compound that, you kind of get stale and overthink your scheme offensively with both Tony Elliott and Brandon Streeter. You have some wide receivers that were, the promised ones when it comes to being the next great one that didn't deliver as much as people wanted them to do that. And ultimately, you got a just bad marriage in the offense between quarterback, coordinator, wide receiver, and it really came to a head at the end of last year.
Yeah, like I said, I personally believe DJ is going to be successful at Oregon State. I know I'm probably in the minority in that, but I think it's going to work out for him out there. And is he going to end up being the NFL first-round pick? I don't think so. I think that ship has sailed. I think he's probably a day 3 guy at this time, or maybe even an invite to a camp. But we shall see. It's all about the fit in the NFL, right? It's about, can we use you? And it's not so cookie cutter as you would think it would be. But it's tough to see it didn't work out, I think. But at the same time, like you said earlier, the statistics that you brought up about 11-3 and the 10-win seasons, that's still really there's NC State. I mean, if you look at their history, I think they have 110 win over the whole 100+ years they've been playing football. They would kill for that. So it's really, and even South Carolina, I think it has maybe 5-10 win seasons total. So, it is kind of like, it's hard to go from Deshaun, even Kelly Bryant was very successful, to Trevor Lawrence, and it's hard to follow the guys. And and plus COVID, that's another problem where they had to shut down. The workouts weren't the same. So yeah, I wish them the best. I really do. I hope it works out for him. But we pivot to Cade. And so what's your feeling on him?
I think that it's kind of funny to me to see people already kind of chucking this up that he's going to not have a great year this year. We only got to see 2 starts, or I say 2, really 1 start and 1 extended relief appearance where he essentially changed the momentum of the UNC game. And, I think there's a definite situation out there where, Cade might start the season a little slower, but slower still could be a better situation than we were in last year, or we as fans witnessing the game would be in than last year. Deshaun didn't start off super fast in 2015, and then he built on it, and was elite by the end of the year. I could see that happening as well. I could also see, I saw people talking about the over-under number of Cade's touchdown passes at 29.5, and everybody was like, oh, hammer the under. It's like, one, you don't know. There's definitely a situation out there where he could throw for under to that 29 and still have a very successful season. If you throw for 28 and rush for 14, and your run game is performing to its maximum capabilities, then maybe those passing numbers are a little low, but it's kind of in the wash when you look at it. But I could also definitely see that number bumping up to 34, 35 by the end of the regular season if he keeps building on his confidence and gets in the flow with his offense. So
I think it's go ahead. No, well, I think it's gonna be hard for him to hit the 29, and I'm not being negative on him. I think the way that they're gonna blow through some of these teams, or we're gonna see the backups. But I think the run game is going to play a part into this as well, because I read for Garrett Riley at TCU, he was more 60% run versus 40% pass, and runs out of shotgun. I just want Cade. He doesn't have to throw 30 touchdown passes to impress me. Protect the football is the big thing. Make good decisions. That's the biggest key.
If he's able to get more pocket presence and awareness, I think that's the biggest struggle that everyone wants to say that he had, which he did. Tennessee, he made some pretty bad rollouts. But I kind of get annoyed with people that just kind of chalk that up that he's going to just stay that way this year. There's an off season for a reason to get better. Is he going to come out game 1 potentially, do great? I don't know. We'll see. But I think that he's going to build off of last year's performance, which he did well. Objectively, he did well. I think that this offense is going to start really finding its footing by the time we hit Florida State.
I agree with you on that. And here's the thing, that the Tennessee game, I think he gets unfairly judged in that, because if you look at that game as a whole, Clemson had about 50 plus plays on Tennessee's side of the ball. They just didn't execute.
They didn't execute.
That's all it comes down to.
You miss field goals. You turn the ball over in the red zone. You can't convert on 4th down. You can't do it all. It's also kind of on play calling. There's part of the reason why Brandon Streeter might have got fired is why you're throwing the ball 54 times. I get that Tennessee's, Tennessee's pass defense is pretty sus, but you've got Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, and at the time you had Kobe Pace. So why are we not running the ball more often there? I think it's about balance in that regard, and I think that's the easiest way to alleviate a quarterback that's getting used to the offense.
And that's, using the run to set up the pass. Some people say sometimes you pass to set up the run, but Clemson statistically on the run game last year, I don't have it in front of me right now, but there was a lot of times in games they were averaging 5 yards a pop.
Oh yeah.
And and I think I've mentioned to you, like, football's still 10 yards a pop. That's all you need to do is pick up a first down. You still want to score points, but I'm excited for Garrett Riley. I remember seeing Morgan's video earlier this year. He had the football helmet, the gloves on. He was really excited for Garrett to come in. I guess that pivots to the receivers. We've seen some great players come through Clemson. Even going back to, Aaron Kelly and all these guys, we could mention tons of names. Does somebody emerge? Do you think someone emerges, that guy that makes a 50-50 ball into an 80-20 ball?
Well, I think here's the thing. You need to adjust your 80-20. That's not necessarily this offense, right?
Gotcha.
That was the MO under Tony Elliott and Brandon Streeter was, let's get a 50-50 that becomes an 80-20. That's not necessarily the case with this. It's about space, pace and space, getting out, getting your guys in space and open and moving along. And I think you've got guys that can do that well. This wide receiving core gets the most criticism out of any unit on the team. And look, I understand why. I'm not going to say that they've performed well by any stretch of the imagination. When you have Justin Ross, EJ Williams, and Joseph Ngata, that should, on paper, when you saw those guys line up there, those should have been the best receivers on the field for either team. But those guys didn't pan out, and for different reasons. And, obviously Justin Ross, unfortunate injuries. He's doing well in the NFL. I'm glad that he's been able to find his footing there. But the other two just didn't pan out. With the guys that are on the roster now, you have a guy in Bo Collins who has gotten better and better every year, right? He was forced into being the most dependable wide receiver in 2021 because you didn't have anybody. Yeah. And then 2022, he got better. In 2022, we saw Antonio Williams emerge as a potential target. And then you get Adam Randall, who is someone that came in early from an ACL tear and looks like DK Metcalf's body type. I think you're going to see more of him, and Cole Turner as well. And then, the saddest part about this is they took 4 freshman wide receivers, and you would think that they took the, Inman, Campobello, Pee Wee team as far as wide receivers. They took some great athletes. And I don't know how many of those guys emerge. I think you're going to see Noble Johnson sometime this season emerge as a potential target. And I don't know. One of those other 3, I think, could be a problem to deal with, whether it be Tyler Brown or Kelly or Hannafin between those 3. I'm not going to say that this is, Nuke Sammy and Martavis, but I think with this scheme with Garrett Riley, you can be just as effective with the way that they play the passing game.
Yeah, I don't think you have to emulate those guys to win a national title either. And that's where I'm going to pivot to the defense. And I look at that defensive line, and I think I read I found a website talking about the last 10 years and DBU. It had the way it calculated first round picks and second round picks. Alabama was number 1, Clemson was number 2. And I mean, we can just go on and on about the great defensive line, and even going back to the Gaines Adams and all that. Tyler Davis is returning, correct? Xavier Thomas. It feels like Xavier Thomas has been in college forever. I got a Roll Rose back, and then Justin Maskell. So what's your vibe on, and even in the recruiting, Peter Woods coming in and the defensive line? I noticed that was the big thing I was going to mention to you, and I use 247. The D line looks strong. They brought in a good offensive lineman. And maybe we shouldn't have skipped the offensive line, but that's okay. But this D line, what's your tempo what's your feel on the defense?
Yeah, so with the defensive line, there's some people might perceive some depth issues as far as one of the end spots. Obviously, Xavier Thomas is going to be the starter at one, and you're hoping you think about last year when he was not hurt. Xavier Thomas was a contributor by leaps and bounds. He was outstanding, and so if you can get that version of Xavier Thomas this year, he's going to be a problem for any offense to handle him. For the other side, there's question marks as what Maskell is going to do. Is Denhoff going to emerge? There are some speculation that, look, Peter Woods had an outstanding spring. Do you shift him over? He can play that outside technique just for a season while you're looking to kind of shore up that defensive end spot. You got guys like TJ Parker, who's doing well. So the question comes on that opposite end and the guys subsequently behind. Even guys like Jaheim Lawson,
Mm-hmm.
who has done the power hour a little bit. I think he might be a little light in the shoes a little bit, but if he's gone from 235 to 245 or 250, and he's still able to maintain that speed, then I think it's a job well done in finding one of those patented Clemson rare finds that turn into stars or turn into contributors. So we'll see. It's a little bit on the depth of the end, so that can be a concern. But also, you look at the defensive tackle spots, there's no question as far as leadership, depth, power, problems to deal with, everything like that. Your defensive tackles, those are in the middle, are just absolute problems. And so I expect a big year from your guys in the middle.
And it excites me talking about the D line too, because I mean, you know this, win it in the trenches, and that's what I think Clemson and Dabo have done very successfully is recruit that D line position, and have coached it very well too, and even developed people into being stars.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so secondary, I, I mean, so it looks like Makumba's back, Sheridan Jones, Jalen Phillips, Swanson. I mean, they get just more experience. I don't know if it's any better, but just more experience, and that has to help for something.
I mean,
And
look, I think they had an outstanding spring. I think that they played really well. I think shifting Makuba back to his safety spot, maybe occasionally playing him down. They mentioned per package they might shift him down to nickel some, which makes sense if you're in specific passing situations. But I think being able to get Makuba and Wiggins and Jones and Mickens all on the field at the same time, this is going to be a deep, experienced, and athletic secondary. Because behind them you've got people like Jones, not Jones, Lucas, Jaden Lucas, Toriano Pride, Sherrod Koval, Venables, Jalen Phillips, and that's not even counting guys that are bringing in this next class that could contribute this year. So they're going to be a deep unit. And I think I'd expect that they're going to have some sort of improvement in the secondary this year. I think that part of the experiment of bumping up somebody like Wes Goodwin, you're going to see some growing pains from that. We experienced that in the Wake Forest game, and the South Carolina game, and the Tennessee game. But you also saw flashes of really, really great play. I think they're going to have a great year this year in the secondary. I think they'll be able to get a lot more production out of that side this year.
The defense is to me the highlight. I think of when I look at this from a 1,000-foot view and trying to get back into studying this a little bit more. There's a lot of excitement from the defense. So I'm going to pivot to games this year. Your vibe on obviously the Florida State game, September 23rd. They have North Carolina at home, Notre Dame at home. Did you any of the schedule? I don't mind if I pull it up here in a second, but what games outside of the three I mentioned have you kind of, a little bit? I mean, obviously, any game anybody can beat you on any day if you don't bring your A game. But
yeah,
what's your feel?
I would say as far as the challenge to me is you getting games at home like Florida State and North Carolina and Notre Dame are huge, because I think that's automatically a big time advantage when you're able to get them in Death Valley. I don't want to say automatic win. They're going to have to play. We just had our home winning streak snap last year, but I think that's a big motivation to keep or get a new streak going into the next year. As far as games that could be potentially tricky, I would come out with three, and they to the varying degrees. I don't know. I look at Duke in game one as a potential tricky game simply because they have a very good quarterback. Now, I'll say this. We've played teams with really good quarterbacks in the past that don't have athletes in the trenches that Clemson's just been able to overpower in the end. So to me, Duke's got to come out and do a lot of things right and have a lot of things go that way, but they can do it as far as that goes. The other one, simply because they just know how to play Clemson, is at Syracuse in week 5. It's a worrisome game because it's a sandwich game. If you get a big win over Florida State, you're going to be looking a little sleepy. That just feels like a noon kickoff
Yep.
And nobody's going to be watching. And you better bring your lunch pail because Dino Babers, I don't know what he does for the other 11 games of the year, but he knows how to get up for Clemson. So
Facts.
that's always going to be one that's trouble. And then the last one, simply because you have the athletes to do it, is Miami. Miami has 5-star athletes. They just have not been able to, maximize that talent. I don't know if this is the year for them to make the move. It's feast or famine with them. Um,
Yeah.
they absolutely have the ability to beat Clemson. They also absolutely have the ability to get beat by 30. They're the most Jekyll and Hyde program really since they lost that national champion, or they lost that national championship in 2002. They've been so Jekyll and Hyde. And so what team are you going to get? You gotta come out and play it.
Yeah.
But it's just which Miami team's going to show up that day.
Yeah, so I think the one that I highlighted is NC State always worries me. It's on the road. It's like a sandwich between the Miami and the Notre Dame game. And another one that kind of like I know I'm the only person that says this, but Georgia Tech always scares me. Just because that you
PTSD.
remember
Oh yeah,
you
you got
remember
Georgia Tech PTSD. Yeah, I know that.
it's hard because they were Paul Johnson, man, and if you didn't just think about some of the Clemson games, the option, we couldn't stop them
Oh,
on
it
third
was
down.
way before the option, my friend. You were
I
talking.
get chills. I get chills talking about it because
Oh,
it scares me.
every one of their losses. I don't recall a time that Georgia Tech has just flat beat Clemson like a drum. Um, I'm thinking back here. You had 98, you lost by a field goal. 99, you lost 45-42 in Atlanta. 2000, they scored with 6 seconds left. 2004, they threw a fade route. You fumbled a punt. They threw a fade route. Let's see. 07, you missed 5 field goals and you lose by 10. In 09, you have the phantom holding call after you've come back from 24 down. 08, like you mentioned, the triple option one. 11, I was in the house for. You have 2 turnovers. One, you're busting straight into the end zone and Bellamy fumbles it. Tosh throws a pick in the end zone. And then Deshaun Watson getting hurt. And
Yep.
that's probably the worst they've ever beat us as far as I can remember. But that game would have been a completely different result. I'd go out on a limb and say Clemson wins the game if Deshaun doesn't get hurt that game. So you think
Yep.
about all the craziness of Georgia Tech. So I understand if you're always worried about it, and that's why I always enjoy it when we, beat the mess out of Georgia Tech every year.
I will say this, and this is probably I am happy about when it comes to the pod system for the ACC. If there's 3 opponents in the ACC that I would love to see Clemson play every year, Florida State, Georgia Tech, and NC State would have been my 3. If you would have given me the choice. I think I know some people, and see where I live in Virginia. It says ACC country. You got Virginia fans, Virginia Tech, Duke, Carolina. I see them all. I'm in a transient military area, so it's just it's littered. But NC State, those are the 3 games I enjoy the most. I mean, as far as what I think traditional Clemson games outside of the South Carolina game, I don't enjoy watching them. They're always stressful. But yeah, the NC State one scares me. The Georgia Tech one, I mean, they're in a recruiting hotbed. They got a new coach. Brent Key finished the year pretty well with them. They just scare me. I know they have high academic standards, but the North Carolina game doesn't bother me as much. I unless North Carolina's improved their defense drastically, I still think Clemson finds a way to win that one. But Drake May, he's a good quarterback. The quarterback play in the ACC is excellent. I want to point that out.
It is probably one of the best years that the ACC's ever had when you consider that a lot of these top 5 lists don't include Cade Klubnik on that list.
Yeah.
And he very well be the best quarterback in the league this year. Jordan Travis is good. Drake May is good.
Yep.
Riley Leonard. I really like Riley Leonard. Like I said, I just don't know if he's got the athletes around him to win in the bigger games. You've got guys like Brennan Armstrong at NC State.
It's a big wild card there.
Yeah, it's a big. The only problem with Brennan Armstrong is you noticed at the end of the year last year, or even from the beginning, he took a lot of hits. It looks like he was losing a little bit of touch. So I question his arm strength if it's, late career noodle arm kind of deal. He's got a very wonky throwing motion. He's not going to be a quarterback in the NFL. He's going to probably be like your Taysom Hill type when you go to the NFL. So I don't know. He's NC State with him at quarterback. They've got the capability to beat you, but they also have the capability to lose by 2 or 3 touchdowns if he's not up to snuff.
So the last question I'm going to have with you, because I know I had a couple more I had to bring it up, but the last kind of schedule question related is, which games are you planning on attending this year? Do you have any?
TBD. I normally get season tickets, but we have had some other things pop up where I didn't get them this year. Ideally, Florida State, Notre Dame, North Carolina, and maybe homecoming against Wake, but that could change. Well, right now we got 2 kids, and we'll see how it happens. But ideally, I'm going to try to find a way to make it to the biggest games this year.
I don't know if I'm going to get down there. So I went to 2017 Clemson, Georgia Tech, which was raining. It was great. It was a Saturday night ABC. It was just a great experience. I ran into one of my old best friends from Virginia High School, one of my Virginia High School up here at the Rock.
Nice.
I turned there and it was just this you wouldn't, how the heck were we going to run into each other? It was just a cool moment. I went to the ACC championship game with Trevor, the Wake Forest game a couple years ago, 63-3. And there's one more. Oh, Florida State, we went a couple years ago before COVID. But I got to catch, and you're going to get to do this too. I got to play catch with my kid on the field, and it was just it's one of those moments. The football's down by the TV. I've got it set up there, and it's one of the, I get chills thinking about it. Just it was just a cool moment. I might actually hit the Duke game up. The problem is I would probably have to go alone, and the one person watching is going to yell at me because she she's a teacher. So that first day for Virginia, we start what's the word I'm looking for? They start school the day after Labor Day.
Oh,
and it's a Monday night game.
Ooh.
So I have to figure out what I'm going to do on that one. The tickets aren't that expensive, and it's not a bad.
Duke's not bad. I've been to that stadium not for a game.
Yeah.
They had I actually took my dad up to Cameron a few years ago to watch.
She wants to go to that.
Yeah, I went to see Clemson and Duke play against Zion Williamson. And that was look. I'll be the first to admit that back when Clemson stunk, pre-Oliver Purnell, post Rick Barnes, when it was the Larry Shyatt years and they were terrible, you pull for Duke, and so that was just something that my brothers and my dad, we'd watch, like Jason Williams and all them. So for my dad's Christmas present, I took him up to Cameron in February of 2019, and we saw them just beat the brakes off of Clemson. But the stadium is nice, dude. If you've never been to Duke's campus, it's a really cool spot. It's not, it's probably a little bigger than a Wake Stadium. And I don't know if they still do this. I just know this from hearsays. They used to do like state
She wants
fair.
to point that out.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Well, I knew Taj in college. We had a mutual friend, so we ran into each other some. But they used to do like food trucks at Duke, so that it's a little different as far as like your fare for the game. It's pretty cool.
So I have been there. So we went to the Clemson North Carolina game in, I want to say 2019, the 21-20 game.
Yeah.
And it had a weird vibe to the whole game. Was just weird. It was a great day. I ran into Lawton Swan. I ran into him at the game for Clemson Sports. I can't remember the name of the show right now. I'm horrible. Maybe my memory's going. But I ran into him there, and it's really cool to talk to him for a couple minutes. And then it was a crazy game. But I actually went to Duke's campus, and they had lacrosse going or something. It's a beautiful little campus. It's a beautiful school. And the Cameron indoor is so small. It looks so big on TV in theory, but once you get there, it's just a regular old gym.
It's a high school gym, and it was strange. We went, it was packed in, and when Clemson was playing there, the students were still on Christmas break, so they still pack out Cameron indoor with alumni. So I mean, you look any of the games after Christmas and before the semester starts, if they're playing in Cameron, the crazies are generally like 35, 40-year-olds that are coming back and just doing that. It's really weird. I didn't know that until that night. But yeah, I enjoy going up to the Triangle. I've been to NC State for a couple games. I've seen Clemson I'm 1-1 in Chapel Hill. I want to get back on the winning way, so I'll probably go back in the next few years to Chapel Hill, and enjoy it up there. We have some friends that live over in Cary, so.
So, how was your experience at NC State? Out of curiosity, because I've always heard bad things, and we've avoided the game.
So I've been 3 times.
Yeah.
The first time we went with some friends of my wife, and I actually got to know my wife's husband really well through the game, so we've become pretty tight from the fantastic experience. My wife's friend got tickets from her boss on the 50. We were sitting on the 50 under the awning at NC State. Clemson won. We were sitting with a bunch of really nice people. Couldn't have had a better experience. So we went back 2 years later and sat in the upper deck that you see on TV. Worst experience that I've ever had. Horrible. And some of them were Clemson fans. It was a drunk NC State fan and a drunk Clemson fan that just made it horrible. We had to.
You can do it.
Yeah, it was. I watched the final plays from the jumbotron out of the stadium, so we didn't. We had a miserable experience. But then 2 years later, I went back and we sat in the exact same seats, and Clemson won 55-10, and it was a blast because everybody left midway through the first quarter. It was awesome. It was a great time. So 2 out of 3, I guess buyer beware. Just know how good NC State is going into the year, but if they're really bad and Clemson's really good, it's a pretty fun time.
And it's a real easy trip for like where I live. So where I live in Chesapeake, like you can just hit 17. And I hit, like, it's just a straight shot. I mean, I've got the most respect for NC State as far as their veterinarian school. Like, they've done great work on a couple of my animals. And, that's a different story. But one of these years, I think we're going to get down there. The problem I have is I'm a military reservist. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times I always lose probably 3 weekends of games per year. And then I have like NC State right now, October 28th. I know that's a drill weekend. I can't do it.
Yeah.
And I can't just skip on it. I'd love to, but I'd get in trouble, and that's not what we want to do. So I want to pivot real quick to recruiting. And I'm not really, when I say this, I'm not really too worried about Clemson recruiting when I say this. And this is the question I think I posed to you is it a troubling sign when Clemson's not taking the top kid out of South Carolina, or am I overplaying that a little bit?
A little bit, yeah. And I think I want to put some perspective to that, because I'll first say, is it stink that 3 offensive linemen that Clemson wanted went to South Carolina this year? Yes. And, the wide receiver that you wanted from Aiken, he ended up going to Tennessee. That stinks. We don't like that. Sometimes it's a numbers game. Sometimes, you want Braylon Staley, but you end up getting Bryant Westco and TJ Moore. And I think you gotta be okay with that trade. Sometimes you deal with areas of the state that are predominantly run by South Carolina. Look, Clemson fans don't admit it. It's hard to go into the PD of South Carolina and pull out a recruit. It's just hard. You don't go to Dillon, you don't go to Manning, you don't go to Florence generally and pull out recruits down there. They normally go an hour and a half up the road to Columbia and play. We've only had a handful that I can remember that went. Malachi Goodman, Jerron Brown went to Sherraw, John Simpson, I believe, went to Dillon. So, you've had a couple in the past that would go there and a couple that would want to go to Clemson. It's not as many as you'd think. You look at Blake Franks, who went to Greenville. That's one that you want. You don't want that to become a consistent trend of losing upstate talent. But at the same time, it's not something that Clemson has built its foundation of recruiting on. The foundation of Clemson recruiting is going into Atlanta and going into Charlotte and pilfering away talent from Florida and Virginia and Maryland and Tennessee and sometimes Alabama, a lot of times Alabama. And if you can get the top guys in the state of South Carolina, great. And if not, you're not at a loss as far as, if that happens. Is it something that I want to happen after year? No, I'd love to sign every single 4-star from the state of South Carolina. Do I think it's feasible? Generally not.
Yeah. And I'm like I said, I'm not too worried about Clemson recruiting, even in the NIL era, because it just doesn't. Because I say this, and this is something, the transfer portal is another hot topic that people we're digging on Dabo for. But if you really go look at the top 5 programs, they don't go to the portal that often because they don't need to.
No, with the portal, I do think that Dabo will eventually utilize it, and he might even utilize it this year. I think part of his non-utilization of it is he's never going to run a player off from Clemson. Now,
Right.
to be frank with a player, he might say, hey, look, you might not get a lot of playing time this year. Take that information as it will. That's just what happens in college football.
Yeah.
But he's never going to say, we don't want you here, or we don't have a scholarship, or we want this guy over this guy. No. Part of what happened was you have all these guys that come back with that extra year of COVID availability, like Xavier Thomas. So are you really going to take a guy out of the portal when you have a guy that's been here for 6 years and has the potential to have a breakout year next year? I'm taking Xavier Thomas. So I think you might see him utilize it. But even when they do, like you said, it's not something that you're never going to see Dabo sign 10 transfer players in a class unless something is dire, right? He's never going to do that. You might see 3, 4, 5 tops in a given season, depending on how roster management goes. But I think it's just going to be a slow mental addition of transfers that go in as they add people in there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was my thing. I wanted to pivot to the recruiting and the transfer portal because I heard a statistic on it, and even when you break it down, the top schools don't go to it because they don't need to. Players want to stay there, and the whole thing with NIL. This is my other pivot with this, and this is probably something that you've heard. Is there's only 22 starting positions out there. You can pay all the kids you want, but if they're not getting the playing time, they're going to roll out.
Yeah, well,
So.
here's the thing about Clemson's NIL. It's so funny to hear somebody, especially somebody on one of my group chats who is a 20-something-year-old being like fervently saying, no, we don't have the money. Yes, Clemson does. They've got the money. When you look at NIL collectives, and the largest collectives have $10 million, there's only a handful of those that are out there, like 4 or 5, 6. Clemson, 9. So we're equivalent with several others, and we're only behind 4 or 5 other NIL collectives as far as that goes. I just think Clemson has to be more savvy with the way that they do things. That's why you don't see them just dishing out checks to everybody, right?
Yeah.
They want to keep who they've got on roster, and they want to be smart with who they bring in. They don't want to toss out a contract to a kid and then them not pan out. Same with all the other sports.
Yeah.
Clemson will take care of you when you get here. It's just a matter of, look, we need something more than just money as a motivator. You go for that. Go to Florida for that. If you need money to be your motivator, go there. But if you're looking to have a holistic package here and get taken care of financially, come to Clemson.
So this is the other thing. I don't know if you're a late kick guy with Josh Pate. I watch him a lot. He brought up a whole thing about the Saudis potentially getting involved in college football. What's your vibe on that?
I haven't seen that subject yet. Now, is Saudis in what regard?
The Public Investment Fund. So you're familiar with Live Golf and what's been going on there, and then of course, but his whole take was that a couple of I don't want to say athletic. I'll find the link and send it to you. But a couple of athletic directors that he knows, have said that it's coming in the future. But his more thing was to like save the Pac-12. But for me, this is where I disagreed with them. We actually had a couple exchanges regarding it. I think that some of the colleges would love the money, right? Because that helps out with them. They'll take anybody's money. But the reality is, even when I talk to people in England about, Clemson football or college football, it's like I have horns growing out of my head, Houston. They just don't, it doesn't transcend to them. So I don't know how the Saudis would really care about college football.
Well, you would think, but they also know what makes money. I mean, you wouldn't think Saudis would be in the golf, and they sunk their teeth in there. I don't know. And I also don't think the thing about golf versus college football is the entry point for somebody like that to jump in would be kind of hard. I feel like a lot of these academic institutions, for better or for worse, would probably say, nah, we're okay. And I think a lot of conferences probably take a similar stance to pre-merger PGA, where they're not going to do that. Now, the only other option is if these investors were to start a separate college football league for for players that wanted to get paid and go all that. And that I'm like, go right ahead, dude. Go make six figures, end up screwing over your career, and end up making college football better because you're taking on the people that want to get money out of it. So,
sorry. Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like the money, it's gonna hurt the program too. The money is a little bit, I think. But that also is it might make the college game better because some guys might stay and do an extra year in college. So it's a weird mix. But yeah, I appreciate your time tonight. Like I said, I know we've been talking off and on for years now about Clemson and college football in general, and I appreciate you giving me the time tonight, man. Like I said, I do a lot of Premier League football on here. I'm starting to pivot to college football. I'm starting to pivot to the NFL. Those are my multiple passions. Like I'm just here having fun, man, and that's really all it comes down to.
That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I'm happy to come on during the year whenevs.
Yeah.
I'd plug whatever I'm writing for, but like I said, I'm taking a little time off right now. I'll probably come back at the end of the season, probably to start basketball.
Yeah.
You might see me on a couple different outlets then, but for right now, I'm just chilling. You can follow me on Twitter at Radio Guy Houston.
Yep, I think I put that in the link for the YouTube thing. Yeah, so tomorrow I head up to the MLS All-Star game. Looking forward to that. We're taking the Amtrak, which is different. We normally would drive to DC, but I was like, nah, not this time. We're gonna ride the train and relax. But yeah, we'll definitely get together again. Like I said, I'm looking forward to college football. It's one last thing, and I know you probably got to go, but the conference, I know we opened the can of worms of conference realignment. Where are you at on this? I mean, to me, the regionalization of college football is kind of going out the wayside, and I hate it, to be fair.
Well, I don't know. That would be something I could spend an entire hour talking
Right.
about as far as realignment goes. I think the funny part about all of this is when you saw the schedules get released for the Big Ten and the Big Ten and the SEC, and how one, as hard as you try, you don't preserve rivalries that way. It's kind of stupid. And then two, if you can't agree on a 9-game schedule in the SEC, and you're going to lose rivalries, and then two, you're going to play a gauntlet of a schedule week to week. I saw Georgia's schedule in 2024, and I'm not saying this because I doubt their talent. I'm just saying this because it could happen when you have Clemson, Alabama, and Texas alongside Tennessee and Florida on your schedule in 2024. You can lose multiple games and not go to a 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
Simply because it's a hard league. And I think that's the first time it occurred to me that maybe even though Clemson or the ACC aren't making as much money, it would be prudent to keep the league together. If you want to add 16 teams, that's fine. Go get West Virginia or somebody like that that's still sort of regional, and keep that together. Because otherwise, if you start doing 16 plus teams, like if you start going to 20 and 24, that's not a conference, that's a league. And I think if you're going to do that, just take the biggest schools, or not even the biggest, take the Power 5 and a handful of other schools that are big enough to go and support themselves in there, and go separate from the NCAA and do your own thing and all that kind of stuff. And then allow the schedule to actually have rivalries in it, right?
Yeah.
You want to have all that, that's fine, but allow the schools to set up who they want to set up, and set standardizations for how to get in the playoff and all this, and NIL and all that you need to do. But just slowly making the SEC and Big Ten bigger, it's not the smart move. And I think we'll look back on this in 10 years and go, oh, well, remember when they were getting bigger and bigger, and then the last time this happened, was the Big East, and they got to 17 teams, and then that conference collapsed essentially.
Yeah.
Too big. So I could see definitely a situation, especially with TV contracts. Disney's not doing too well. ESPN's not doing too well. You know, after you get to the end of these contracts, do you see other conferences maybe start to poke their chest out a little bit and start pulling teams back in?
And I think I hate to say this, that's where that Saudi money discussion was brought up from the Public Investment Fund. It's obviously, this is something we could talk about again, like some other time. Because I do have, and I know like the ACC, I remember it, 9 teams, you played everybody, you knew you were going to see Virginia every year. I loved it. Right. Now I don't see Virginia anymore. I don't see Virginia Tech, and obviously I live up here, so it's a little bit of a different vibe. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the season. The kickoff September 4th, so I think we're like, what, 40, 30, 30?
48
How
days.
many?
I think
48 days?
Yeah, or 47 days away.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Houston, I appreciate your time tonight. And like I said, it's been fun. It really has been.
No problem, man. I appreciate you having me, and I'm willing to get on, man. I know you're a big Arsenal guy, but if I had to pull for a premier team, I'm a Red Devils guy. So sorry about that. But enjoy your weekend, man, at the MLS All-Star game, and
yeah,
let's see what happens.
I'll be fair with you. I know, like I said this to a couple people. There's a chance Arsenal loses on Wednesday to the MLS All-Star team, and here's why. The MLS All-Stars have been playing since about February. Arsenal just come back in preseason form. These guys they're on the beach. They look relaxed. We'll see what happens.
I want. They aren't going to have Messi for the MLS All-Stars yet, are they?
No.
Or Inter Miami yet, I don't think.
So he just got announced for Inter Miami recently. So they did the whole welcome to Miami, and Robinson's playing there. Is it? I can't remember his first name. The striker for Clemson for a couple of years ago that went first overall. So he's playing there at Inter Miami. I don't know if he's getting game time. I don't really check the MLS like that. I'm a DC United guy, but it's crazy what's going on in that sport right now with the money and even the lack thereof money at some leagues. But we're going to have fun. Like I said, we will definitely catch up again. Like I said, thanks for your time again. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. The thing that impressed me the most, your Georgia Tech remembrance of trauma.
I have a lot. It's less of knowledge and more of a sickness when it comes to the amount of retention I can have with college football. So yeah, man, I appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you again, man. Enjoy your rest of your week, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks. Everybody, thanks for tuning on. Again, Houston at Radio Guy Houston. Is that right? For Twitter. I'm Arsenal9986 on Twitter. And you can reach out to me if you ever want to talk anything. And that's all I've got. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.